What's shaking, cats and kittens? This is Rob Lee from Truth in This Art, your favorite podcast. Every week, I help share the stories of artists, cultural leaders, and entrepreneurs. Small business is the backbone of a thriving community. So this month, I want to show some extra love to our presenting sponsor and small business, Double Dutch Boutique. For the holidays, remember to shop small, shop local. Double Dutch Boutique carries locally made in Baltimore vendors such as This Sporting Life, Creative King, Black Radish Handmade, and so much more. Head on over to 1021 West 36th Street in Hamden or on the web at www.doubledutchboutique.com and tell them Rob Lee sent you. Welcome to Getting to the Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and this is on MTR Podcast. Today's guest is a Baltimore artist and faux finisher in a perpetual state of exploring and developing the mediums which she employs. Please welcome Kelly L. Walker. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's so good to be with you today.
Oh, likewise. So I read some things earlier, so I have new questions that you didn't receive.
Good. I love that.
But I want to get to I want to start off with the vital stats. Where'd you grow up? How'd you get started? And what brought you to Baltimore?
Oh, my God. That's such a long story.
Or whatever the abbreviated Cliff Notes version of it is.
Okay, the Cliff Notes version is I was born in a very small Midwestern town. Factory working people, blue collar. Moved to St. Louis, got to see a big city after my mom married an executive, which was kind of wild because everything changed. Class changed, surroundings changed, everything changed. I didn't like it very much. I felt very out of place there, but there I went. Had to go. I was a kid. Then he transferred his job to North Carolina. So I spent most of my life in North Carolina before I ended up in Baltimore when I was 18. Mm-hmm. And I've been here for 27 years. So I've been here longer than any place else I've lived. But Baltimore really raised me. North Carolina, I picked up a lot of things along the way, obviously. But it was Baltimore that turned me on to art. It turned me on to architecture. It turned me on to design. It was here that I really blossomed because I didn't know creative people at all. I mean, looking back and going back and visiting as an adult, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of creative people in my family. Yeah. But I would have never considered them artists. And I didn't know art was something one could do.
Let's talk about your work. So what are you ultimately, which is going to sound gauche, why are you on this art podcast? And describe your process.
Oh man, I'm just a maker. I'm a making machine. I'm just a creative force that it's hard to rein me in. Honestly, now that I've found this outlet, it's hard for me to, keep it at bay. I have to do the work now. There is no choice in the matter. Finally let it out. And, I always knew there was something a little wrong with me. Wow. There's something a little off. There's things that I'm interested in. There's, I get stimulated by color. I get excited about, layering and textures and fabrics. And, I'm touching these speakers.
I noticed.
I'm fondling your padding on the walls. I'm like, that's nice. But I didn't know that way of thinking was important until I got here and I got hired in a business as an apprentice. I didn't even know I was an artist, honestly. Mm-hmm. I started making things around 22. About 22 years old is when I first started to create work. Before that, I'd never taken an art class or explored that medium, never even took it as an elective in high school. Mm-hmm. All my friends were in the art classes, but, if you had an elective, I remember weaving, and I would find this piece in those classes. I went to drug rehab a lot as a teenager. And that's honestly where I first started. I made things. They make you make a wallet. They'd make you, I was always making a bong, something that I could create out of clay that I could smoke weed with as soon as I got out. That's neither here nor there, but there was this, and actually that's kind of important because there was this connection with my creative energy and sobriety. Mm-hmm. And I ended up becoming sober when I was 18. Here in Baltimore, I hit a really intense, obvious bottom. At 18, I hitchhiked here. I was I like to say I was feral, which is pretty wild. I mean, I was living to party. I mean, I just wanted to stay loaded all the time. And you can do that really well in this town, right? But you can also do everything else in this town. And so my first interaction with Baltimore was a little sad and dreadful. And then I ended up getting struck sober. And my whole life changed. And I started as soon as sobriety began, all of a sudden I had all this energy that I needed to find an outlet for, or because I was using it to kill myself for so long that now I had this available place inside of me that needed to come out. And so I started making collage. I started, cutting magazines up and maniacally gluing, stuff together. And I started making these weird shadow boxes that, they were very racy. It was a lot of, sex toys and religious iconography. I mean, I was going through a lot of things back then. I was discovering my sexuality. I was confronting these things that I was confronting, in my day-to-day life, homophobia, racism, all these things that were bothersome to me. I was starting to create on purpose with, and made these collages. And that's how I got hired. I was also a bike messenger, and I would be making these works. And I didn't make any money, but when I showed them, people liked them. And I felt like, wow, it was the accolades of people being like, wow, this is good work. I like this work, that made me go, maybe I'm onto something. And so that work is how I got hired as an apprentice at the decorative painting company. Yeah. And I'm very grateful for that because it's completely changed my life. I mean, that introduced me to mediums that were way past my scope at that time. I was cutting up magazines and taking photographs and collaging these things together that way, found objects. But that world, that painting world, that high-end interior design world, that's when I started to really be like, oh, I'm attracted to these textures. I understand these layers. Oh my God, this color makes me feel this way. This position, this fabric, this, and being exposed to wealth, being exposed to how other people lived because I'm in their houses, painting. It was wild. I mean, it was a whole other world. I mean, I grew up in Indiana. You know what I mean? I was born in Indiana, very, all of a sudden I'm in these houses of, executives and I'm experiencing abundance for the first time. And I'm also working with materials that are super stimulating, learning how to manipulate mediums to create layers and to create energy on a wall, a flat surface that feels like there's something moving, which I just loved. And I took to it it was just magic. It just made a lot of sense. So I hope I answered that question.
So within your process as a creator, as let's say, if you were to make, let's say X right now, whatever X might be, because you're a maker, right?
Yeah.
What does that process look like? I understand that there's a component of stimulation there. Mm-hmm. It's that color, I want to do something with that color, or that material, I want to do something with that material. So speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I get inspired. And honestly, I said something, and I think I talked to you about the fits and starts that I get to create in, because my time is stretched very thin because I'm doing a lot of things. And so my studio practice is my most sacred time, but I don't get it as often as I'd like because I'm getting pulled in from the other business, from the other creative place, which is Art Star, which is really what pays me and what keeps my my employees employed, and that's a whole nother exciting adventure in and of itself. But that takes a lot of my time and focus. So I literally have to create space to work. And sometimes time and energy are not in the same place at the same time, and I fucking hate that. It's super frustrating to be it's Saturday evening, I have cleaned the whole day off, or it's Saturday and I'm so tired I just want to read a book. Yeah. And being okay with that, being okay with reading the book. And then, I haven't been in the studio in probably 8 days, which is horrifying. I mean, I've traveled for 5, come back from that, and started this huge project that I really needed all my focus on. And I can just feel it building in me. I just need to release. I need to work. And so thank God I have a studio helper, and I'm hey, let's start. I'm really wanting to create some layers and textures right now. Some small pieces. And so I'm having her stretch some canvas, gesso some things, start moving some color and energy around in the space. And then tomorrow I have the whole day and night to just paint, almost the whole weekend. So that's pretty much how I do it, and I never really know what's going to show up when I go to work. I get frustrated a lot because I have to stop once I get a flow going, because I have all these responsibilities that I have to attend with. So, the fantasy is someday only have, I can't wait to be able to only do that, to just show up and serve my studio process. That would be, that's the fantasy. That's the retirement plan.
I like to, and thank you for sharing that, actually. It was a lot there, actually, to kind of cut through.
There's a lot.
But one of the things that and people will ask, like, how do you do all these 1,000 podcasts? And it's like, you do 2 other independent things outside of this.
Right.
And maintaining a day job, a relationship, some semblance of a social life, and the various murders that no, that's not right. But
your Dexter side hustle.
Well, the podcast equivalent of it.
Right.
But it's essentially, it's like still time. I have these different buckets, but right. Right. Absolutely. You got to make time.
You got to make it.
But I like to steal in this, like, if I can shift and maybe combine 2 things. So maybe it was something that I picked up from like the 4-Hour Work Week or what have you. Not that I read the full book, but I got enough of it that I applied it immediately. And it might be, all right, I'm going to do some cardio, but I want to read this book, or I want to play this video game. I want to do these things and stack them in a way that makes sense. So it might be, let me network, but also let me try to get some guests, but because I think those are separate things.
Right.
Like networking to show people and try to scale and grow what I'm doing, but also I'm scouting too.
Yeah.
And those are 2 separate things, and you make that time.
Yeah, that's the business mind, I think. Mm-hmm. I love that part of my mind. I didn't know that was there. And I'm like, well, this just makes sense. Like, this just makes sense that this is the better use of my time, is to multitask these things. And which is one of the things that, ArtStar really feeds me, because ArtStar makes me be in the studio. Mm-hmm. At least a couple days a week, I have to be in the studio creating client samples. And once I'm in the space, I will ultimately sneak over to my studio practice, get the business up and running, get the give the direction that needs to be given, and then I can sneak off into my own personal space. It's a little scary, though, because once I start working, I don't want to stop. Like, I just want to go until I'm just drop dead exhausted. So
for those who are uninitiated, quickly, what is ArtStar? You referenced it, and I don't know if anyone else is following and might not be aware. So give them the rundown of what ArtStar is.
So that's the faux finishing part of what
my intro.
Your intro, yeah. When you said the faux finisher, I have this painting company, decorative painting company. We do plasters and painted, murals and some sign painting, but mostly like murals and interior wallscapes, ceilingscapes, a lot of plaster and tactile materials. Mm-hmm. It makes perfect sense. Like the 2 parts of me like really feed off. I'm like right in the center of these 2 places. Now, the ArtStar is more, I'm catering to a clientele that is saying, I want my wall to look like this and to feel like this and to be this colorway. And so they're dictating, they're dictating what I do. And then, they'll dictate the color palette, they'll dictate the texture mostly. Very, very rarely do I have free reign to just go into a client's house and do whatever I want. Never, actually, doesn't really usually ever happen. There's a lot of like process, and it's like a whole lot of science behind that. It feels more like baking, like, baking cake, following a recipe, creating this thing, right, time and time again. And then there's my personal practice where I use a lot of those mediums left over from jobs. I'll take, plasters left over from jobs, and I'll start my canvases or my panels that way. And I'll just kind of like manipulate the materials in the way that I want to manipulate them. Yeah. I'll throw some gold leaf and spray paint together, which those 2 mediums usually don't ever collide. But in my studio, that kind of stuff works so well. Yeah. Like I have a series of work right now that I'm making asphalt and gold leaf pieces, and they're fucking incredible. I love them. It's like some of my favorite work because it's exactly me. It is truly like that gritty. Like these are just 2 products that we'll never touch anywhere else but my studio. And it's just raw and edgy, but just enough that it's still contained in a frame and it's nice and pretty and approachable. But really, if you really think about asphalt, you're like, that is a working class material. Like you're not going to, it's on all the streets. It's everywhere. It's like, we walk on it. We don't even give it a second thought. Yeah. But when there's gold leaf applied to it, It's like the contradiction, that juxtaposition is somehow magical. So like that's what I'm doing in the studio. I'm like taking the gold leaf left over from the Pindry and I'm leafing it on one of my pieces, you know, and getting a studio helper has been a big game changer for me. You know, learning how to accept help has been a huge, like, are you doing everything by yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
how, and you're 36.
Yeah.
This is about the time when I was like, I need help.
Well, like I said, I've been doing it for...
But we're doing different stuff.
Yeah, and doing it for a while. Like,
right.
At one point, it was 5 podcasts, and I have an editor.
Right.
Like, but I was doing all of the editing, too.
Yeah. Well, so at least you have an editor.
It was a thing, but when it comes to, like, for the most part, it's a 1 1/4 man show.
Right.
And I'm barely a man. But, but it is one of those things.
Look, you have a full beard.
This is fake. So let's go into this one. What has been a similar experience that informed your interest as an artist? And I think you've touched on it, but is there anyone like being more like pointed and saying like, when I watched this movie, I knew I wanted to do this. What would be that similar experience? I feel like it was partially like that move to Baltimore, but... Yeah,
Baltimore had so much to do with it just because I was exposed to all these things that I had no idea existed. I don't know. Architecture, design, race, culture, class, you know, all of that energy that's here, all those opposing forces that are all like together here, it makes it a really, it's just a really intensely beautiful place. You know, I love all the chaos and the beauty and like, I love the fallen down buildings. I know that sounds crazy. I love some of the gritty parts of Baltimore, but I love like the polish too. I feel like I've grown up with Baltimore because I came here kind of an abandoned building and I've turned into kind of a, you know, nice apartment. You know, like it's weird. Like we've grown up together. I think buying a book about Andy Warhol, like I picked this book out at it was like a thrift store type of, you know, used bookstore in North Carolina. I was visiting my girlfriend in Asheville and just happened into this place that had used books. And there was a book that was called Holy Terror. Of course, that caught my eye, and it was pink and lime green and, you know, all the colors that bright, vibrant, you know, fabulous colors. And I picked it up and I read this book about Andy Warhol. Yeah. It turned out to be a biography. And I just fell in love with this guy. I was like, this guy, oh my God, I didn't like, wow. And so that kind of really started it. And then I got, you know, kind of obsessed with like that whole era of creatives. Mm-hmm. You know, I started reading about Studio 54 and I was like, you know, thinking about the Rolling Stones and the Velvet Underground and Andy Warhol and his factory and all the drugs and all the sex and all the weird movies and all the things that he got into and got away with. And, like he's fascinating. I mean, we all know and love his work. Yeah. But you know, all the people that came out of the factory, you know, all had their own little 15 minutes, right? There was, I have like the Candy Darling diaries. I just started reading everything I could get my hands on about the most like subculture of that culture, you know, and then Baltimore is just full of subculture and interest. You know, I'm like still obsessed with Edith Massey and, you know, and John Waters and how Fells Point used to be even 27 years ago. It was a whole nother world. It's just weird to see what's happened.
Yes.
To both of us, to me and Baltimore, you know?
So let's see, because this is a question that kind of came out of your bio. Describe 3 of the most important lessons you've learned from the school of life.
Oh, my school of real life.
Uh-huh. Don't smoke in the bed.
Yeah, don't. One of my favorite things, well, make time is one of them. That's my new motto.
So are your knuckles.
Yeah, tattooed my knuckles. I'm like, you know, every time something happens now, I have to get a tattoo about it. Like, I got to remember this time. You know?
All I have is this. This is like literally...
That's a rough spot.
It was great. It was great. It was a good time. So I enjoyed it.
I'm like...
Oh, I know.
So fucking covered. And I'm like... You know, emailed recently. I'm like, it's time. It's time for some more. I got some more places. And I did not intend on getting a bodysuit. And a friend of mine was like, are you going to get a bodysuit? I'm like, no. Are you kidding?
It's like you have 98% of a bodysuit.
And I'm like, fuck. Like, I look at myself sometimes. I'm like, holy shit, I'm like 75% covered, at least. Like, that's crazy. How did this happen?
I saw the web post. You're like, yes, I'm wearing pants. I was like, that's funny.
I know. I'm like, because it looked like a little racy there. Yeah. Okay. So, don't laugh.
I'm going to keep laughing.
You're so funny. What is my favorite quote? I can't remember it. I'm so tired. You and I are both on the same sleep schedule of not having any. Use what you have, start where you are, do what you can. That's one of my favorites. Because oftentimes my brain is so troublesome that it will think me out of taking an action. Like, it'll think me out of just showing up in the studio for that 2 hours that I have time for. Mm-hmm. And I will not, I'll choose inaction instead of taking the action. So, or I'll go to work and I'll be like, damn it, I don't have any black ink. Like, I need black ink. Damn it, I didn't go to the art supply store. Well, I guess I can't work. Nope. Like, let's start where, what do I have? Well, I have, it might not be the alcohol ink, but I have this other kind of ink. Let's see what happens. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things I've learned. I've learned to keep moving or you'll die.
So a shark.
Totally a shark. I love sharks. Like, I can't stop swimming or I'll sink to the bottom and drown. Like, I was
going to say, now you're just referencing Finding Nemo. And
is that really a reference?
You got to keep swimming. Yeah.
I did not know that was a thing. No, I've never seen that.
Well, now you have to watch it.
That's crazy. Yeah, you probably should. That's a classic, isn't it? It's a cartoon, right?
Yeah, 2003.
Damn.
Yeah. I'm a movie guy. So.
Okay. Yeah, you're good. We actually did talk about like 4 movies already. It's pretty cool. I learned that in work, like when I started getting successful at work, mm-hmm. One of the people that was really helping me in my early sobriety was like, listen, when you get to your job, like, don't stop. Mm. If there's clean something, wipe something, cut something, see if you can help. Like, how can you be of service? That altruistic way of being willing and being ready to take an action has been for the first time after getting sober, I was able to keep a job and then get promoted. Like, I was like, wow, this shit's actually working. Like, try to be helpful. Yeah. Like, try to be useful.
These are lessons that can be applied for anyone. Like, as I'm hearing them, I'm like, I have my own version of each one, and like, they've made sense. Like, they all make sense. It's not like this is solely applicable to me and my circumstances. It's like, no, this is gonna be applied.
Yeah, it's like to everyone.
Yeah,
to everyone.
Because especially that just kind of using what you have component, like in here, right? They're like, I'm used to my home setup. I know what my equipment is. I know because I set it up.
Right.
But when I come here, that's what I was doing earlier. Let me check this and make sure this is right. Let me get the right check on this. Or if this is on the fritz for whatever reason, or if I have a card that doesn't work, I'm going to try 5 or 6 different MacGyver type techniques to figure out the best way to get audio out of here and get this interview recorded, because that's what I committed to for this time, for this day.
Right.
This is what we're doing. And, some people say, oh, well, it's not the proper setup. I guess I'll do something else.
We'll have to cancel. Let's do it another time. Yeah, like
you don't get it.
Exactly. Right.
So this is a new one.
Okay.
I read that you changed an industrial space, a body shop, into a home. The quote, it was the ugliest building I've ever seen. What was the thinking in taking something in that bad of a shape and turning it into a home?
I had to do it. I had to get out of the neighborhood I was living in. The house it just didn't function anymore. I had outgrown it. Yeah. And it was like, I had paintings in the guest room upstairs. I was making work in the 2nd floor guest room. My whole basement was an art studio. My washer and dryer had paint all over it. I was using everything to work on. Yeah. And I've always been a tornado in the studio. Like, I'll come down and I'll just start frenetically painting. Yeah. And then moving things around and letting them dry and letting them sit and going to something else. And then kind of, this whole energy happens, like really chaotic energy. But then when they dry and they're, then I'll slow into like what I'm doing next. Anyway, it's just how I've always been. And, I was taking photos in the kitchen, like my paintings were laying on the dining room floor. Like it was, the office, the guest room, like I had like a five bedroom house that was, 4 of the bedrooms. Like I had one little nook that was just like my bathroom and my bedroom and like half of a kitchen. I can barely even remember that house now. It's been like, I've only been in this building for 8 years, but my entire life has changed. And it was absolutely terrifying because I knew I needed a space. I knew how much money I could afford. I knew what the bank said that they would give me, but I didn't trust the bank. Thank God I don't trust the bank ever. Because they always say, oh, you can qualify for this amount of money. And I'm like, no, I can't afford that and still have health insurance and groceries. Like I've just always been very practical about finances. Very lucky in that way. I listened to the old people. I listened to my grandparents that like did not have debt. They didn't buy a car if they didn't have the money. Like I've got this old school philosophy kicking in my inside that's really serving me well, to be honest. But found this building, knew that I needed a bigger space. I knew I needed a live space. I knew I needed a workspace. I knew I needed a place to park my car. And I had no idea what that was going to look like, but I was open to the process. And this building happened. And I had walked past, actually, I took my car there in 1993 to get the windows tinted. It was like a body shop, a chop shop on Madison in Utah. And there used to be a lesbian bar, like a block away that I used to go to all the time. And so I walked past this building. It was always super sketch. And like, it was way sketch that now because somebody had renovated it in 2008 and then they foreclosed on the whole block and the whole block was kind of disheveled. I mean, it was a mess. It was a hot mess. But I could afford it and it was the right space. As soon as I walked in that building, I was like, this is it. And it was ghetto. I mean, it was sketchy, dude. There was like bullet holes from the inside out and the windows were so rotten and like almost falling in. It would rain and the water would come in. I mean, just everything about it was like terrible, but it was in a good location. It was close to the highway. My people could get to work. One of my longest time, my work wife, drives from Virginia every day to come to work. So I needed to be close to the 95, it was the right space. Yeah. And I had no idea what was going to happen. And I didn't have a plan and I didn't have any money. I mean, I didn't really have any capital. I had my entire life savings and a bunch of hustle. Yeah. And it just started to unfold. And as the more unfolded and more got discovered and uncovered about it, the more I was able to like, okay, I see it. We got to move this over here. We got to do this over there. Yeah. Okay, let's drop this wall. Okay, so it started with total chaos of like breaking walls down and the big gallery space was painted dark brown. It's like it's a light filled, incredible room, but it was painted. It was just terrible. They had like dark red paint, dark brown paint. And it's like, it was weird. It was just wrong. It was just all wrong and designed like the energy in the design was like just jagged and it just didn't flow. So first thing we did was start ripping stuff down. Mm-hmm. And, and then finally I got to like painting the floors and like getting drywall. And I just, did what I had and used what I had. Yeah. And I didn't have money to put, we had to like jackhammer the like things in the live space that were where the cars would like rest their tires on. I was going to leave them. And the contractor was like, should we get rid of this? I'm like, yeah. And, stuff like that. And it unfolded and it evolved. And now it's like this really magical, beautiful, beautiful home. Yeah. I mean, it's like really the first home I've ever really had, like real home where it's like, wow, I created this. Yeah.
And that's the thing that I'm hearing, like out of that chaos and those things that it's like, this looked, what's the word? Raw and edgy, bullet holes initially, and then it's like now it has the components of being a gallery space and a living space. It's like, who would have thought,
Yeah, and that's
not for you, of course.
Well, like I didn't have a vision. I mean, that's so much of like what I do is I don't have a directive when I start. I just start. Mm-hmm. I just start moving, and then it comes, and it makes me believe. That there's larger forces at play, mm-hmm. That I'm tapping into some right stuff now and I'm inspired and I'm, part of this process of like evolving and the building certainly evolved and it's wild. You got to come over sometime. You got to come see it. It's really sweet. Totally. I mean, I love to open it. I mean, I feel like I've been given that space so I can have parties and stuff. I like to have fundraisers and have people come over.
So let's see. Well, we already have an answer for that one. I was looking at it because I was like, the way that your answer, I was like, you're hitting the question. I was like, you're cheating. So, okay, this is where they start getting to the personality-oriented ones. If you were stranded on a tropical island, what are 2 things that you want with you?
An iPhone. I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, good luck charging that.
I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I would say, actually, I've been thinking about this one because it's...
A boat.
It's terrifying. Yeah, like a boat's pretty promising. I think I would want a water filtration type of thing. Practical. And some fire.
Some matches.
Like some matches, because I would never have the patience to sit there and like rub a stick together until it made a fire. I would die before that happened because I just don't have any patience. So, but if I had the starter kit, I think I can get it going and keep it going.
And that leads you to the other things, like one, you need water.
Yes.
And it's like, look, if there was a branch here, I can sharpen it and I can stab fish. I'll be able to eat.
Yep.
See, that's one of the better versions of it, because usually people say, oh, well, if I had this or maybe a book, I was like, that's going to be useless.
Yeah.
Like enjoy like what is it, Wilson or what have you.
Wilson. Yeah. I mean, when I watch that show, I'm like, oh my God, that's so horrifying. He had to take his cavity tooth out with that. It was awful. Remember when he took his tooth out?
I've never watched it.
Dude, you have to see that show. It's good. It's actually really good. FedEx clearly paid for the whole movie because he was a FedEx pilot and FedEx is everywhere. You got to see it. But it was good. But he freaking made a fire with the stick. That would never happen. I would totally.
That's not something I think, like, I'm pre-caveman, like proto, like before fire. I was like, oh, what's that? It's like seeing magic for the first time. Yeah. It's like, bewildering. So, let's see. This is a pretentious question, but I am going to ask it. And this is actually the last question before I get to my rapid fire questions.
Okay.
What does creativity mean to you?
Yeah. God, that's hard. What does it mean to me?
Yeah.
Well, it means absence of boredom.
Fair.
No boredom.
Nobody likes to be bored.
I do not like to be bored. Thinking bigger. Mm-hmm. Trying different.
Yeah.
It's definitely not boring. I remember my girlfriend, she was like, what do you mean you don't drink or do drugs? Like, what? What are we going to do? I'm like, we're going to do everything else. And it will not be boring. And she's like, I don't know. I like to get loaded, but I'm old and I'm kind of over that. So maybe.
Oh, no.
I'm like, let's get mountain bikes. Let's go on vacation. Let's go do all this other stuff. Sorry, back to that. What does it mean to me? I mean, I guess freedom, all those things. It represents all that.
Because I think people throw around, like, when you have those sessions, like, oh, I'm creative. It's like, are you though? It's like how do you, like, and I think that question is very worthy of, even though it's pretentious, I still recognize it's pretentious. Like, what's art? Like, but I think when someone asks that question around, like, what's creativity or how do you deem creativity, it's something to kind of get an idea of what your headspace is. Because I've had people that I've talked to or do interview, and it's like, oh, so why are you doing art? It's like, just to make money. And it's like, all right, so that answer might be different for them. It's like, creativity is a way for me to make money. It's something I can, monetize. And other people's like, it's an outlet. It's
so interesting.
It's so many different things I think it can be.
I mean, it is an outlet for sure, but I mean, the money always comes. It's just not, and it used to be my focus. Like, oh, if somebody doesn't buy something at my show, then it's not worthy. Mm-hmm. Right. And because my self-esteem all came from like, am I making a sale? And now I'm like, no, you're cultivating an energy. Mm-hmm. And the return is sometimes money, but oftentimes other things. You're getting paid, like, another quote just popped in my mind that
bonus quotes.
Yeah, bonus quotes. Happiness is the byproduct of right living. That is one of my favorite thoughts. And I think it's aligned with what is creativity too, because when I'm being creative, well, my whole life is creative. I can't get away from it. I'm just, I've just got that thing.
A ball of creativity.
It's just a ball. Yeah. I'm just like, and I like people and I get stimulated by all the things. So like keeping the conversation going, takes a lot of creative energy.
All right. Now it's time for this last thing. That was the last actual question. Now it's time for some rapid fire questions.
All right.
So this is a new segment, hasn't technically debuted for anything that you've probably heard yet. So the way that these rapid fire questions work is I'll just ask you a question and it's like the answer is what the answer is. You don't need to provide any additional context unless you want to.
Okay.
First question. Use one word to describe your computer ability.
Negligible.
Okay, good. Favorite curse word?
Fuck.
That's on brand. What is your favorite beverage?
Topo Chico.
You too?
I fucking love Topo Chico.
Which
Well,
flavor?
I like lime, but white, just the clear white is also very good.
Okay, I was.
Were you disappointed that I said lime first?
Yeah.
I mean, the clear is pretty money, but listen, you can't drink out of the bottle. You really have to pour it in a glass. Like I've been drinking out of the bottle. And I'm like, then I went to dinner and they poured it in a glass. They had at Salio's, plug for them, freaking awesome place, awesome restaurant, great chef. They poured the bottle and I was like, God, this is the best water ever. And I realized, oh, it's different than the water at home because I'm not pouring it out of the bottle. I'm drinking it right out of the bottle. Yeah. So I've been pouring it and it's even better.
The worst one is the grapefruit though. Grapefruit
I haven't
is poison.
had that. Okay, I won't try it.
Like
no problem.
just grapefruit is like whole is poison.
You mean just grapefruit, the fruit?
Yes.
Oh, okay. You hate grapefruit.
Yes. I call it poison.
That's funny.
My girlfriend loves it. She hates broccoli. So she's like, broccoli's poison. I was like, yeah, but broccolini's great.
Broccoli is pretty delicious.
See, I try to tell her.
I mean, it is pretty delicious, but I'm a grapefruit fan. Like now that I don't eat sugar anymore.
That's like 2 right there.
I know. Oh shit. I better go. It's time for me to leave. But now that I don't eat sugar anymore, I can peel a grapefruit and eat it and it feels sweet. Or a banana is like too sweet.
It's like, I won't say his name because he's been canceled, but that's like a bit from a comedian where he's like, yeah, kids' taste buds are overstimulated that fucking apple tastes like paper to them.
Yeah.
And that's a legitimate thing. But once you start, quote unquote, detoxing yourself from some of these things,
right,
then you're like, oh, that's what that tastes like?
Yeah, it's wild. Like I quit smoking I've done a lot of stuff during the pandemic, which has been pretty wild.
Good
like I kept smoking. I would smoke and I would stop smoking. And then I thought I like to smoke in the studio. And I don't know. I quit smoking.
Don't let me forget to tell you about clove cigarettes.
I love clove cigarettes.
Don't let me forget to tell you I have a story about them. Not going to say on mic.
All right, go ahead.
Worst tattoo related question that you've received because you're 75% or more covered.
What is that? Is that the story of your life?
Oh my God. Did it hurt?
I fucking hate that one too. Did it hurt?
It's a terrible
What'd
one.
your mom say? I'm just like, my mother hates my tattoos, but it doesn't matter. She's fine with them now.
My mom, when I got this one done, she was like, is that a demon? I was like, it's an Oni. She's like, what's that? I was like, all right. It's like, just,
all she says is demon.
Literally. I think I know the answer for this one based on the fact that we both were working off the same amount of sleep. Morning person or night person?
I'm a morning person.
Say.
I mean, I did not ever see that coming, but there is not enough hours in the day to create everything I want to create. I actually love running a business. Mm-hmm. I love running a successful, thriving business. I love the drama of it. There's a lot of drama. I mean, I work for creatives, with creatives, and I'm a creative. There's a lot of opportunity for things to get a little weird. But I like getting up. I do prayer meditation in the morning. I do some journaling. I've just been, I have to make lists without a notebook full of what I have to keep in mind that day. And I use my meditation practice to kind of keep me awake to what I'm supposed to remember to do. Yeah. And I'll sit there and I'll meditate and then something will occur to me. Oh, I need to do that. And I'd write it down. There's a thing called two-way prayer. That's been my jam lately, is just sitting quietly, saying some prayers, sitting quietly, and writing down what comes. And sometimes it's something like, don't forget to ask your assistant to do XYZ. And other times it's like, hey, you should follow up on that person that messaged you on Instagram about whatever that you buried because you were so busy and stuff was happening. Like things will come back. It's so wild. It's like I'm tapping into something for sure. It's not me. I do not have that much power.
I'll say I remember I was having this block and just kind of running into you do a lot of stuff here. You learn a lot about what people are doing. And as a person that's a creative at heart that kind of is trying to justify podcasting as a creative outlet, it's storytelling and so on and all of that different stuff. But you kind of encounter it like that from my standpoint. I kind of encounter it regularly where it's like, I need to do something as a reset. And I just remember it was this one time, and maybe it's in Eckhart Tolle.
I love Eckhart Tolle.
It was one of those things where I was just like, I need to really just sit here for a minute. Yeah, don't
do anything. Just sit here.
And I got past this block because like right now I do this podcast, which is a lot of moving parts. And this one takes the most of my time because it's like, oh, you're working with other people, you're working with their time, their schedules, and everybody is living and breathing. It's kind of you have to, but you can put it out whenever, right?
Right.
Unless someone has something coming up and you want to really help out. But then I do a movie review podcast, and I can kind of have a little bit of flexibility, but that has the most research that's involved in it.
Right.
And then I do like a pop culture one where that's just purely improv, but I have to be on.
Right.
So it's just
a lot of energy.
Yeah. So I was recognizing that I can just program this. I could just ask questions and I can work off the person I'm interviewing. But the other ones, they were kind of suffering because I was putting so much energy there and I was having this block and prepping for one of the other ones. And I was like, I don't feel funny. I don't feel interesting. I got nothing. And I sat there for a minute and really just started to let things go. And then I had the weirdest observation. I was like, that's going to pop in a podcast. I was like, I'm back, baby. Let's go.
Yeah. It's like you get recharged. It's just like my iPhone. It's just like my phone. I'm like, it's like another appendage. Like, I mean, I have to, like, I am a mix. I'm such a walking contradiction, honestly. I'm like, don't stop swimming or you'll die. Don't just do something, sit there. Like I am like literally in the middle of those two things like all the time. But I'm like getting so much better at like having this conversation with my internal self that's like, okay, you're tapped. And there's warning signs, right? I start getting cranky. I start feeling self-pity. I start feeling overwhelmed. I start feeling not creative, or I start, believing the dark voice, like the harder voice that's not so nice, the one that's not the one that I don't like to subscribe to, but it was mostly there most of my life. Yeah. I'm now like, no, you're just tired, dude. You just need a nap. Like, take a nap. Like,
you run into the naysayer pretty regularly.
Yeah, like fuck that naysayer. Like, there's my word. Like today, it was like, I was so tired that there's a part of me that would have pushed. And like, I told you the story before we started, like, that I would have gone to the job site. I would have been miserable. It would have been cranky. I would have pushed myself. I would have been dragging ass for this. Like, I wouldn't have done anything to recharge or self-care. Yep. And I was like, fuck it. It's all under control. It's fine. I'm going to turn the phone off. Turning the phone off, walking away from that phone is probably the smartest thing I ever do. And I don't do it enough because I'm kind of a slave to it a lot. But like, I just recently had an experience where I left town for 5 days. I went to my girlfriend's family's house in Alabama. This is not where I want to go if I get 5 days off, right? This is what my mind says. Yeah. And my mind is not, what does they say about your ego is not your amigo? Like my mind that's where my ego is, right? And I'm like, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. I'm in the busy season. Like, I don't have time to go away right now. Well, we bought the tickets. She's super excited. I have to go. Yeah. Even though I thought about not going because I was so busy, right? And I ended up just surrendering to the fact that I needed to just go on the plan and try to have a good attitude about it. And I ended up reading one book in one day. I was like, oh my God, I have the ability to read a book. Like, I thought I would start books and put them down, and it ended up being like, I walked away from my phone. My phone stopped. It was like, I help create, like, I do have power to create my reality.
Yes.
And I always think that my reality is created for me, but the reality is I can put my phone down and say, nope, I'm not doing this. I'm going for a bike ride. I'm going for a run. Yeah. I'm not answering the phone. And then I'll get back to it when I'm ready. Yeah. And then I come back and it's not, sometimes I'm punished with 57 text messages and a whole lot of drama happening and things that I needed to attend to. But 99% of the time, it's been quiet too. Yeah. Like I got to dictate that energy flow by saying, nope. Yeah. There's just been a million little things. Like I love Eckhart Tolle. I love that whole subscription to my mind is really, it dictates my reality and I get a say in that.
Absolutely. I'll leave on this one thing that kind of ties into that. I did that dive into the metaphysics and all of that, just different stuff to try to cope with how I was perceiving reality. And I have this, those, it's almost like when you have the movies, you slide the letters in and all. Right. I had one of the little small ones you line up, and it literally, I haven't changed in 4 years. It just says, what is real?
Right.
And that's all it is. And it's just kind of that, my version of memento mori, carpe diem.
Right. Right.
So that's the conclusion of my interview, but I want to open the floor up for you to shamelessly plug. So social media, website, all of that good stuff.
Where
can people check your stuff out?
Yeah, I'm kind of out. I like to make energy for sure. I'm on IG is my favorite, probably. Kelly_L_Walker is my personal practice site, and ArtStar Baltimore is my company Instagram. My website is kellywalkerfineart.com. It's my personal practice, and ArtStarCustomPaintworks.com is the decorative painting site. And you're familiar with my work. I mean, I've done just a ton of work in town. We've been so fortunate, and I have the best freaking team. The team of people that I get to surround myself with, really, I'm blown away by how talented they are. And together, we're just this kick-ass force. So super happy to be doing what I'm doing with the folks that are with me. Where else? I mean, I'm all over the interwebs. IG is probably my favorite. That's how you and I met.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. When I realized I have another doppelganger.
Yeah, I know. Quirky.
Yeah, shout out to Quirky.
Oh, man. Well, I thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Totally.
I like the rapid fire questions. Those are good. They keep you on your toes.
Absolutely.
That was good.
So for Kelly L. Walker, the raw, edgy, yet approachable Kelly L. Walker, I am Rob Lee saying that there's art in and around Baltimore. You just have to look for it.